Greetings to all C3RF members and friends across Canada and indeed around the world, and a special welcome to the folks at Veterans for Freedom on their dedicated streaming channels as they view this video summary of the C3RF update for 13 December 2024. The title of this update is Comeuppance, and it kicks off by recalling that just over a year ago we discussed Kristallnacht in Canada as the country seemed to be mimicking the goings-on of 1938 Nazi Germany. The comparison was an easy one to make, given the fact that in both instances we witnessed the persecution of Jewish populations with the tacit approval of the governments involved. In the Germany of November 1938, the authorities knew of the vandalization and beating of Jewish businesses and citizens respectively, but only stipulated that the party not be involved. In the Canada of last year, we saw the same dynamics in play as Canadian Jews were threatened with chants of Khyber, and from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. Such threats of genocide would be augmented this year with supporters of Hamas deliberately overwhelming Jewish neighborhoods with swastikas, anti-Semitic signs, and masked men of military age. Given the current state of affairs in Canada, one could be forgiven for believing the nation had forgotten its never again promise that came on the heels of Nazi atrocities in World War II. Indeed, it seems that it has descended into its own version of Kristallnacht, or perhaps has chosen to revisit the Canada of 1933, when the anti-Semitic Christie Pitts riot saw 10,000 brawling for 6 hours again in Toronto. The Christie Pitts riot cannot be seen as an outlier event, as Canada in the first half of the 20th century had a deserved reputation of being decidedly anti-Jewish. After all, Jewish Canadians were relegated to second-class citizenship. Businesses refused to hire them, universities restricted their enrollment, and entire neighborhoods prohibited the sale or rental of housing to Jews. But that was then. How could Canada, after 60 years of honoring the never again promise, stand by to witness a new Kristallnacht in its streets? Standing by is not a throwaway term when it comes to describing what is ongoing in Canadian cities across the land. Indeed, if anything, Canadian police and judicial services have demonstrated consistently that cracking down on crime is a selective matter and very much dependent on just who the victim is. If truckers try to bring a government to heel in the matter of vaccine mandate overreach, the government becomes the victim and the truckers get the wrong end of the Emergencies Act stick. If Jews in their own neighborhood are intimidated and threatened by swastika-bearing men en masse, the Jews must be whisked away, lest the disguised rabble-rousers take offense over their presence. The proof is in the pudding on this latter reality when one considers the plight of journalist Ezra Levant for trying to report on the North York Kristallnacht of late November 2024. He was summarily arrested and given the bum's rush into the slammer, just like the 30,000 young Jewish males who were transferred to Dachau, Buchenwald, Sachsenhausen, and other concentration camps during the Nazi Kristallnacht of 1938. It's truly remarkable to see how far down the Kristallnacht road Canada has gone in the last 20 years. Recall in 2006, for example, that the world then, as now, was witness to a full-blown war between Israel and Hezbollah in Lebanon, with far less acrimony spilling over into the Canadian cities and streets. Oh sure, I saw the odd car trundling through my Canada neighborhood with a Hezbollah flag attached, but Jewish neighborhoods did not come under dedicated and unchallenged attack as they do now. It is quite evident that over the past 20 years, Canada has changed in ways that are both unsightly and worrisome. Indeed, it would seem that we have left the rule of law behind on our way to becoming the first post-national state, a post-national state with no core identity. A state that has no problem arbitrarily punishing its enemies while rewarding its friends. The trashing of the rule of law to introduce arbitrary systems of governance and oversight in Canada in such a short period would seem to be evidence of a ponerogenic malignancy. Recall from our last few updates and the discussion of Andrew Lobaczewski's magnum opus Political Ponerology that such a malignancy develops when the normal majority accepts concepts contaminated with moral deficiencies. The resulting ponerization process provides the ideal laboratory for power-seeking miscreants and psychopaths to inject themselves or be injected into positions of authority as normal, meritorious persons are deselected. Given the centralization of political power in its prime ministerial and executive or cabinet offices and the unconstrained delegation of legislative powers to the administrative state, Canada is ideally suited to host and promote such a process, which ultimately leads to the instatement of a pathocracy. With his powers of appointment and control over the nation's agenda, particularly in a majority government situation, the Prime Minister of Canada has the capacity to be a dictator. So it is as he or she gets to appoint senators and senior judges along with all of the members of cabinet. As chair of the cabinet, the Prime Minister controls its agenda and greatly influences the activities and priorities of Parliament. This is all fertile soil for the uploading of personalities amenable to the leader's ideological predilections and the downloading of those who would dare disagree. This top-down selection process has a powerful impact on the face and personality of the judicial system, as identity politics figure largely in the appointment of our most senior judges. And so it is that courts demurely rubber stamp rulings with mootness and margins of appreciation, thereby allowing government narratives to override the evidence at hand. Lobachevsky notes that the pathocracies created by the ponerogenic process are fragile beasts. Their instability is baked in by virtue of the lies that are spun to construct them in the first place. Prime among these are those that are embedded in the narratives that power-seeking psychopaths use to attract adherents and gain control over society's levers of power. Cases in point for Canada might be the storylines associated with the diversity and transgender ideologies that have gripped the nation's social and legislative scenes since it became the first post-national state in the world. In the former case, the diversity is a source of strength messaging is countermanded by facts on the ground that reveal populations ever more divided by tribal and foreign conflicts. In the latter case, we see promises of saving the gender confused from self-harm only resulting in desperate attempts to detransition and warn others away from irreversible surgeries and hormonal treatments. Another source of instability that threatens the pathocracy is found within the very true believers that join its ranks to form its first tranche of advocates and leaders. Longshoreman philosopher Eric Hoffer described these joiners as those disaffected with the mundane accomplishments of their own lives and ready to will into being cities that had not yet been built and gardens that had not yet been planted. They are taken in hook, line, and sinker with the surface rationale attached to the ideology on offer, unawares of the true motivations harbored by the parasites that are behind the scenes and who have attached themselves to the social movement. Lobachevsky notes that though it is inevitable that these true believers will eventually understand that they are mere tools of the men behind the curtain and minus blackmail or extortion, they'll begin to drift away. Then there are the normal people who make up the vast majority of society under attack by the parasitical counterstate. The rising of a pathocracy depends very much on their acceptance and or compliance with the measures and deprivations they are forced to endure on their way to utopia. There comes a time when the pathological quality of these hardships will be made known to the normals, and hard questions and actions will not be far off. It would be fair to say that the Trump and Brexit phenomena of 2016 are part and parcel of such a comeuppance and indicative of a pathocracy's decline. As we have seen in reportage from these pages discussing these very events, the pathocracy has no choice but to redouble its efforts and to manipulate and censor information to maintain control. The way of things has been set, however, and before you know it, the normal strike back decisively as they did in Romania in 1989 or in the United States federal election of 2024. In closing, a reminder to join us at CanadianCitizens.org, where you can see this update in its full glory, including all the links to all the cited documents. Simply go to the News tab at the top of the page and select C3RF member updates from its drop-down menu. Until next time, this is Russ Cooper signing off, wishing you and yours much happiness and freedom.